time for Licking on Lending.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have you with us.
Welcome to Licking on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update providing up-to-the-minute information on interest rates, loan programs, and hot industry news, all related to the mortgage industry. Brought to you by Transformational Mortgage Solutions. To participate in today's program, our guest call-in line is 646-716-4972. Now here's your host of Licking on Lending, David Lickin.
Let's begin.
Listeners, I'm excited to bring to the podcast today a new friend of mine, Dean Harrington. He's the founder and CEO of Shamrock Home Loans. And in 2003, Shamrock was named the #1 mortgage company to work for by National Mortgage News. We've got to find out why that is. In fact, that's really the context for having Dean on. So you see, Dean and I are both a part of an organization called C12. It's a business group of men. It's like, a lot of people have heard about Vistage. Well, this is where CEOs of companies get together once a month, and they have as their foundation, and the common ground is, unlike Vistage, which has many faiths, this is based around the Christian faith, C12 is, and it's 12 CEOs that get around once a month, and there's chapters all over the world now. And Dean was featured on a video on C12, and I go, why is it I don't know this guy? I liked him. So we had our conference in Denver, annual conference, C12 conference in Denver, and he spoke, and I met him because Casey was speaking. He was up talking to Casey, and that's how we connected. And I got so excited when I heard him on his breakout session talk. I go, we have got to share that with our listening audience. So listeners, welcome with me, Dean Harrington. Dean, good to have you here, friend.
David, it's a privilege. It's an honor. It's the things I never thought I'd get to do in my life that I seem to be doing in this season of my life. It's just such a blessing. And, even though you just met me that day, I knew who you were. Everybody in the industry knows who you were. So I actually ran into you at a Lenders One conference a couple of years ago and just had a quick hello just to make a connection, and had intended on kind of following up and making sure that we built on that relationship. And that was what Denver was for, in part, was to be able to connect with you after my talk and be able to tell you how fond I am of the work that you've done. And just this season of time in our industry where it's so challenging. But C12 has been a powerful influence in my life. Just to kind of expand on that just for a second. If the listeners are out there wondering what it really looks like from the inside out, it effectively means that someone like David and myself that sits at a group with 12, we are their de facto board of directors. Mm-hmm. And so in my group, I have 11. So in that group, I'm essentially on the board of 11 other companies. And likewise, they are all on the board of Shamrock Home Loans. And boy, you talk about peer-to-peer refinement and just tremendous, tremendous content. We spend one day a month, one of our 20 work days, all day with our C12 members and it's our colleagues. And it's been such a blessing in my life since October of 2014. Wow. So again, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, well, it's really a real blessing. I think you raise a good point, because when you surround ourselves with business owners, CEOs of other companies, you're not just getting your perspective from like Lenders One. That's where we originally met. I'd forgotten that. I'm so glad that you reminded me of that. But shout out to Lenders One and Mortgage Collaborative and all these groups where we get together as an industry. But when you get perspective outside of our industry, we have CEOs looking at the mortgage industry. They cause us to broaden our focus as we go back and look at it. And I think there's just such a benefit to that.
Let me tell you a funny story from my first meeting. October of 2014, there was another guy at the table who was in his first meeting, Paul Marston of Abernathy Trucking, and his business was fuel delivery to service stations throughout the Northeast. He had 114 trucks. And there were some new regulations had just come in, which capped their speed and mileage requirements, and they were having trouble getting drivers. So we have to do this 5-minute intro or less of who you are to show the rest of the group who you are. And again, there were 10 others that had been together for a while. Paul and I were new to that particular table. And then everybody gets to speak for a minute in a lightning round of what they'd like to say. And so I go through where I am in 2014 in the mortgage industry. And Paul has to speak in, even though he's a new member, and he's going clockwise around the table. And he says, hey, my advice to you is, could you please stop saying can't, shouldn't, won't, all the negativity you just dumped on this table? I've never met this guy. He said, in the fuel delivery business, you have no idea how difficult things can be. And one of the great things about being in a group that is from different industries is there are times you say, well, I'm so glad I don't do that for a living. Well, right now, I'm that guy. I'm that guy at the table. I'm so glad I don't lend mortgages for a living.
Yeah,
but so the perspective of that is just, and Paul has become one of my best friends. He's actually a C12 chair now. He sold his business and became a chairman in C12, and he's one of the great encouragers in my life. And he was at that talk as well in Denver. David, and he's
He
just
was. Oh, I would love to
he's
meet
an
him.
incredible
We're
guy.
together.
Incredible,
Yeah, I can't
incredible
wait to meet him. I love these kind of stories. But for those that don't know you, you're well known in the Northeast. In fact, I got to give you a shout out. I was mentioning to Emily Farley, who I have the honor and privilege of being her coach, executive coach, and I said I met Dean Shamrock. Dean Harrington of Shamrock Mortgage, and she went on. She goes, "Oh, I love that company. If there's ever been a company that closely aligns with our values and what we are, it would be Shamrock Home Loans." I've met Dean. I'd love to reconnect. So hopefully you and Emily have connected again.
Yeah.
But you are well respected in the Pacific. I mean, I'm from the Pacific Northwest originally, so I default to that, into the Northeast. And so tell us a little bit of your journey to where you're at today, Dean.
Yeah, I'd like to do the quick version because I think there's so many out there that have accomplished great things, and you don't need to hear my story till the end of the show. But I started Shamrock as a mortgage broker in 1989, became a lender in 2001, and then steadily progressed from that point. Pretty much stayed in our backyard, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Grew a little bit into some other states that were convenient for our New England borrowers, mainly places like Florida and some of those second home destinations. Have done well most years. Again, as you mentioned at the top, we were named the 2023 number one company to work for in the mortgage industry by National Mortgage News. We had been number 2 the year before, number 5 in 2020. And I'm blessed to do what I do. I've got a great senior leadership team that's been with me forever and ever, and included last year we added Kurt Noyce, who had retired at Embrace Home Loans, and I know a lot of people know Kurt.
Great guy.
Talk about a dream team putting together. So we're in the same market everybody's in right now. 70% off in the total market, 40% off in revenue per loan, and just trying to become better through this storm, which I think we've all seen happen. If you can get through a storm like this, a winter season, time in the desert, whichever analogy you want to prefer, boy, you come out of it so much better. So I'm looking forward to seeing what God has on the other end of this at this point. But yeah, that's pretty much who we are.
It's great. Well, one of the reasons you have achieved the honor of being the number one mortgage company to work for by National Mortgage News was because of what you presented in your breakout session in Denver at the C12 annual conference. I want to get into that, and I really want to share that. So I'm going to have you as well as you can. I'll interject and get some comments going, but I would like to have you share with our listening audience what you shared there and what has been and why it is so important to you being named the number one mortgage company in the U.S.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, David, because it's one I need very little preparation for because, as the CEO, I'm the chief reminding officer. More than anything else, I have to remind people of who we are and what we do. And so as I spin through this, some in your audience will hear the EOS platform mentioned. Some that know Donald Miller and Story Brand will know that a little bit. Some that know Tim Pollard, compelling communicator, Mike Sharrow at C12. These are all people that have helped pour into me over the years and come up with really what I define as the most important aspect in building a business. And that is, of course, the people. And so we all talk about culture, but culture ultimately really is your brand. And your brand and your culture is determined by the core values you have, and not aspirational core values like, hey, we're about integrity, we're about trust, we're about honesty. In this industry, David, you've got to have those things. You can't play the game without that. Yeah. So it's actually a set of core values that you build around people that you admire. So you think about who are the people that you've admired that you've worked with in your company over the years, and you look at their attributes that you admire. You say, what are these things that I admire about them? And you'll usually come up 3, 4, 5, or 6. And if you do this with your leadership team, you'll probably put 30 or 40 words up on a board of things that you admire about people. And some you'll quickly dismiss that, look, I admire their sense of humor or their athletic ability. You might throw those out. But if ultimately you come down to 5, 6, 7 that really resonate on every single list, they're there for every single person, then you take those and you look back at your leadership team and say, especially you as the CEO, do I represent these? And eventually you'll get down to 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 at the highest end. And then you've just got to word them in ways that you can actually review employees on them. So I'll give you an example. One of our core values is consistent daily demeanor.
Consistent. Repeat that. You said that really quickly. Consistent. Yeah, sorry. Break that down a little bit.
Yeah. Consistent daily demeanor. Now, we define that as be someone that's approachable. You might think, well, what do the two have to go together? Well, we all know that if you've worked with someone that's a different person every day, the net effect is you don't approach them because you don't know which version of them is showing up in the conversation. So for us to come together as a group of people, consistent daily demeanor is critically important. Now, you can be an introvert one day. I mean, an introvert, an ambivert, or an extrovert. You can be a 6 on the scale of excitement level or a 10, but just be reasonably the same every day because I got to know who I'm coaching when you show up. So we review our employees, our staff on that twice a year. And if anybody steps out of violation, so we have 5 core values, pretty much use a plus, minus, and minus system. And it's what you'd expect. Plus is you like that most of the time, plus, minus, sometimes yes, sometimes no. minus you're not. Our bar of tolerance is 4 pluses and 1 plus minus. We don't wait for those reviews if somebody falls off scale on one of those. And we sit down and review them. And the reason this is so important, David, that this is the reason you want to build a company that somebody names the best company to work for, you've got to be willing to understand this, that core values are what you expect of one another.
And it really identifies what is expected, but it's your identity, your company's identity. If there's anything that can be pointed to, people should be talking about this, whether you have them hanging in their wall and they memorized them or saw them or not. This should be the thing that is the most evident in the marketplace about your company.
Yeah, certainly in the marketplace relative to recruiting and retention. Do share it with our referral partners. Our clients and our borrowers don't really need to know. So we have a different message for them. But
that's a good point.
And we do not put them on the wall or put them on placards, because if they are, how real are they? I mean, if you're going to get reviewed on it, every single employee in our company knows the 5 core values, because they've had to sit there and be reviewed on them. And if they get a plus minus on something, or 2 plus minuses, and we say, look, we need a corrective measure in Heart for People, which is another one of our core values, which we define as the ability to listen and the willingness to share, an interdependence. We found that that's the most successful people in our organization over the years. So that's why we pick it. We don't pick it because we like it or we think it's fancy. And I got to tell you, David, we've had some really tough moments over the years. And one of them was in the last 60 days. Well, we've had to terminate somebody for core value violations when they were really good producers. 3 times. I almost hate to say this out loud. 3 times we've terminated our number 1 salesperson over core values, because it's what we expect of one another. And what I would encourage the listeners that have any role in hiring or retaining people is, every time you bring somebody into your organization, every time you review somebody, I want you to envision that every single employee is standing outside your door, looking in the windows on your wall, if you have windows, or in your door, and they're saying, don't let that person in if they don't fit. Don't let that person in if they don't fit. Don't let that person in if they don't fit. And we're not perfect at it, but we pretty much have it down to, this is what works here. And when you interview people, that's when you turn around and say, look, these are our 5 core values. I've got some questions to kind of dig out whether you fit this. I'm going to call some of your references, but ultimately, I'm not going to know what I got till it's here. Anybody that does hiring knows that. And when you get here, if you're not this person, don't take the job. Don't take the job.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Let's go through your real quickly. You've mentioned a couple of them already, but just so our listeners they're probably curious like I am. I know what they are, what you've said before, but what are your 5 core values? Run through those.
All right. So consistent daily demeanor and Heart for People, I've already kind of laid out. Resourcefulness is another one. And these we consider resourcefulness. We don't stack these. We put them in a circle. None is more important than the other. And we define resourcefulness as, this is kind of weird. You've never heard this before, I would bet. Be able to defend the work you've done before involving the time of somebody else.
I like that. I'm chewing on that as I'm listening to that. Let that sink in. Yeah. Say that again.
Be able to defend the work you've done before involving or looking for the input of somebody else.
Give us some examples around that.
I'd love to. So for every one of these core values, by the way, Dave, and you probably heard me say this in my talk in Denver, we have a history, an example, a value, and an anti-value, and an analogy. I'm going to spare all those, but here's the one I would use in this is, hey, so I'm a pre-processor. I'm coming up the line. I'm going to be a processor in another 6 months. I'm walking through it. And I decide, because I'm walking by the president's office, to walk in there and say, hey, look, I don't know the loan to value write down on a rural property in Massachusetts. Let me go ask him. Now, Rod Corey, our president, former Major League Baseball player, is going to look at you and he's going to say, did you look it up in the HUD guidebook? That thing's got 1,000 pages. Who can go through that thing? Did you Google it? That's the internet. You can't trust the internet. Did you ask another pre-process sitting next to you? They're all on the phone. You get the drill. You got to be able to, look, we want to help people, but we established ourselves for a lot of years by hiring outside the industry and teaching people the business. That's most of our DNA. So you can imagine resourcefulness is important, because if you come in and you're just setting everybody on fire by asking a million questions, it just doesn't work. That's resourcefulness. That's an important one. Positive influence is another one. Positive influence, we do not call positive attitude. Positive influence is be able to improve the performance of those around you. That's critically important. And that's one that's kind of interesting, because we used to call it 1s, 2s, and 3s. 1s improve the performance of others around them. 2s have a net no impact. And 3s have a drag on other people. So we used to say, as a loan officer, you could be at a 1 and a 2. As a non-loan officer, you can only be a 1.
That's good. That's so good.
And we've kind of stuck with that. The last one is really important. It's the one that we find in the beginning is the hardest one. This is the one that trips people up and gets them gone faster than the others, is intellectual curiosity. We want people that are really interested in why something is so, because when you're interested in why, you will absorb the information, retain it, and be able to dispense it to others. And so we've had a determination probably 3 months ago that They just kept asking the same questions over and over. And you'd say, well, why do you think we need that? And they said, well, it's one of the guidelines. Why do you think it's material to a credit decision?
That's right.
I don't know. I don't think about credit decisions. Okay, I'm going to help you out. You can actually leave here and go to a career with it doesn't have credit decisions. I say it more nicely than that, but so that's our core values.
I think what's really clear is you set clear boundaries for what works inside of your company. You're not saying that this is the end all be all core values for the industry, but to work at Shamrock Home Loans, these are our core values. If you operate well within this, you will live well. If these rub you wrong or you don't align with these, well, I mean, I would imagine that creates a sense of safety, a sense of protection for those that are there that do subscribe to these. It's got to have a holding power, a staying power where people are not going to get recruited away to another company that might have a better compensation plan because those values have been so ingrained into them. Talk a little bit about this. How do core values hold people in the right way to your organization?
So I'll tell you, this is a great question, by the way. Really, really great question. So we all know that you want to get the right people on the bus. Yeah. If you have the right core values, we'll move your seat on the bus. Don't miss that. If you have the right core values, we'll move your seat on the bus. And we've done it numerous times. We took somebody who was reasonably gifted in marketing and we put them in our processing program and they became our processing manager within 3 years, like an incredible rapid ascension. Why? Because they fit the core values and they weren't working out in marketing. They weren't as creative as we wanted them to be. So rather than get rid of them, we said, look, this is a core value fit. Let's move their seat on the bus.
That is really important because a lot of people hire to job skills rather than the core values. And so you have that as their number one priority. And when you find someone that identifies and aligns with your core values, you're going to make that work. And you're going to do everything you can. Doesn't mean it always works out, but you're going to do everything you can to make that fit well in another seat. Just because it's so hard to find those core values, someone that aligns with them, I'm assuming.
It is. Let me shift slightly to reason that they stay, though. The reason that they stay is a little bit different. That's core purpose. Some will call that mission statement. And I call it, if you get your core purpose right, which we didn't for 20 plus years. I kept switching it. It was awful at times. Got to have a mission statement. So I'd have one. And David, my list of roadkill mission statements would fill a volume. They were just terrible. But we finally got it right because I met a guy named Donald Miller, Story Brand. We actually went to Tennessee and met with him, had him work on it with me. And ultimately, people stay because the core purpose is strong enough for them not to hit the snooze button. Is your core purpose strong enough not to hit the snooze button? So when you're building a core purpose, and the core purpose is why you come to work every day. And that's what will keep people here. If they believe in the core purpose, Simon Sinek has that great saying of people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so Miller teaches, this was a breakthrough for me, and I would highly recommend his Business Made Simple platform, cheap subscription. He can take you through this. Every single core purpose is a movie, screenplay, book. It's got a conflict, it's got a resolution, and it's got a happy ending. We got this so right back in 16 or 17, within the C12 world that I started doing this for other C12 companies. You heard me share a bunch of them in my talk in Denver. So what was the conflict in our industry that Shamrock was solving? And I love that I'm talking to my industry right now because you will all resonate with this. People deserve to live in a home they love, but they don't know how to make that dream a reality. That's the conflict. They don't deserve to live in a home. We tried that. Remember everybody? 06, 07, 05, that doesn't work. When somebody falls in love with a home and they can't have it, it breaks my heart. And if your mission statement breaks your heart, it's the right mission statement. It's so critical. So the conflict of the movie.
That is, I want to settle in on that just for a minute because you hit on something there that resonated with my heart. Is say that again. There was actually a profound statement there.
If your core purpose breaks your heart, it's going to have legs through your company like nothing else. Your core purpose as the owner should break your heart. Doesn't have to break everybody else's, but if it breaks your heart, it's going to run through. Andy Stanley, who teaches a little bit in the Christian world, kind of a little bit. Sometimes, yes, sometimes a good business teacher. I'll say that. Said years ago that it's one of two things. It's what breaks your heart or what is considered impossible in our industry that when somebody figures it out, it's going to be a game changer.
Exactly right.
Well, that second one's a hard question. So I just went with what broke my heart. What breaks my heart is family comes in here, they fall in love with this house, their offer got accepted, and I don't want that dream to be dashed. I want it to come through. So our conflict is everyone deserves to live in a home they love. They just don't know how to make that dream a reality. What we do is at Shamrock Home Loans, we've built a mortgage application process that's accessible to the ready, the almost ready, and the someday ready. That's the middle part of the movie. And the happy ending is so that everyone gets to go home to a place they love. So when I spin all that out and you go tell somebody, David, what that story was with that movie is, whatever they answer as to what it's about is your core purpose. And for us, it's, well, the movie was about everyone deserves to live in a home they love. So every single person at Shamrock comes to work for the same reason, because everyone deserves to live in a home they love. If you can make that core purpose an injustice by throwing the word deserves, and I want to get crazy with that, we don't want a trophy for everybody. It'll put it on hyperpower. So that's what keeps people coming to work. That keeps them not hitting the snooze button. And if you have the right people on the bus and you give them, look, we're here because everyone deserves to live in a home they love, that is also a resource filter. So we have two resources in business, time and money. So it empowers your staff to be able to say, do I spend time and money on this? Well, does it answer everyone deserves to live in a home they love? Now, if they're looking at an investor loan where a guy owns 8 properties and he wants to flip this one quick or whatever, we don't want to dismiss that potential loan, but it's not our core middle of the bell curve. It's not the reason we're here today. It's something else. Okay. So it's a resource filter when it's done right.
There's so many things. You talked for an hour. I hung on every word you said when you were giving that. I wish I could broadcast this out to the entire industry as I'm sitting here listening to you speak at the C12 conference. One of the things you did is you went through some principles on how people can establish what their core principles should be.
Core values or core purpose?
Core values.
Okay. Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to get your leadership team together in a room. You want to have all of them identify an individual in their mind that just nails it. It's good if it's a current employee, but it can be a past employee.
Okay. So you're talking about find an individual that best embodies what you liked, and you start identifying what the values are to that person. Is that correct?
What you admire about them. So you ask yourself,
admire them. Okay.
If we could hire 100, fill in the blank, Mary Johnsons, we could hire 100. We'd only need 50 of them. That's how good they are. So everybody comes up with that name, and you just simply, you don't even have to write the name down for your colleagues. Just write down what you admire about that person. And there'll be, when we finished the first iteration of this in 16, we had 54 admirable characteristics on the board.
Really?
Now that we played keep, kill, combine. So when somebody has integrity and honesty, that's the same thing. Trust and honesty, same thing. So we get down to about 15. Then we took out the ones that we would call pay to play, that you have to have these just to open your doors: integrity, honesty, trust. We have everybody's financial information. We can't have that as a core value. I've seen some people put core value of faith on there. Now, I'm someone that believes this is God's company. One of my core values is not faith, because what am I going to do with somebody that doesn't have faith? Am I not going to hire them? Of course not. Yeah. So you're going to throw out some that don't fit for one or two reasons. Then somebody's got to sit there and say, hey, are any of these aspirational? We like them so much, we've got them in there, but they're not really evidenced in anybody we've ever seen.
When you say aspirational, I want to make sure that the listening audience understands that. That was a point you made in Denver I thought was really good. When you say aspirational, what do you mean specifically?
All right. So I might have core value of smartest person in the room. No, that's not a core value. I would say able to absorb complex details very quickly. And I put that in there, and I got better wording for it, but it's a core value. Quick absorption of information, whatever. Mm-hmm. I'd like that, but it's aspirational because there's a whole bunch of people that excel here without a 60-second brain. They take a little time to process information. That's okay. So aspirational is, this sounds really good, and it'll sound good in recruiting, and it'll sound good in speeches, but it's not really who we are. And it's not really on any list of anybody I wrote down that I admire.
Good. I mean, it's aspirational. It's something you would aspire to achieve, aspire to be, is obviously that. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, it's rare that you come up with it in your stuff. What isn't rare is ones that are pay to play, that, hey, look, we have to have this anyway. You can't have that as a core value. Or ones that are restrictive. And I fight this with some of my C12 companies that, look, I've got in there that a core value of the scripture is, all scripture is true and breathed by the Holy Spirit through God. You can't have that as a core value.
No.
What do you do? Not hire somebody that doesn't agree with that? You can't do that.
Okay. So let's continue on. It's inspiring people to create core values that will help them attract and hold people. Continue on.
Yeah. And so the other thing that we want to talk about, so we haven't talked about our clients and our customers. So that's a how question. How do we do our job? And EOS teaches you, and I can't suggest this enough, the answer to that is an answer to a question. When we've done our best work, what do we just do? When we've done our best work, what do we just do? Now, we're in the mortgage industry. Some people are going to say, we got them a good interest rate. We got them closed on time. That's not your best work. Good grief. You're out of business if that's the best work you can do. So we identified this years ago, is when we've done our best work, we've kept the client excited from contract to keys. We'd like to say we've kept them
contract to keys. I like that. In other words, all the way through the whole process.
Contract to keys. So we look at it this way. I think this is interesting. We had a thought exercise earlier in the year. who's responsible for contracted keys? So we have loan officers, we have LOAs, then we have our processing people. So we built a model years ago that everybody has a piece in that contracted keys solution, keeping them excited, keeping them not afraid. But as we've seen a downshift in the industry, 70% reduction in potential market and available market, inventory problems here in the Northeast that are pretty substantial, began to look at who's responsible really and who can expedite this the most efficiently. And we decided to take the approach that we can't lean on the loan officer for the contract to keys experience. They have delivered the business into the building. We as a company have to own the contract to keys experience. They're responsible for getting the prospect to our door, but then we've got to own it. And we've actually said the LOA can't even own it because it's still on that origination side.
That's
and so
good.
now we've changed from processors to mortgage operations officers, which have two skill sets. So David, you and I both come from somewhat of a church background. So somebody have to bear with this analogy, but it's so perfect, I can't not use it. There's two types of pastors that you can go to church and see on Sunday. There's the pastor that's a really good teacher and compelling speaker. And then there's the one that can run a great organization, because many churches are big organizations. It's rare that that person is the same person.
Exactly right.
Right? We've been around the church world for a long time. When you find that person that's both, I call a black swan. So our mortgage operations officers that we build are that person. They have the contract to keys ability to expedite turn times ahead of expectations, but also communicate to borrowers and to clients in a way that extinguishes fear. That's a rare.
Boy, that's such an important part. There's so much fear pent up in this overall keys to contract to keys process. There's so much fear in that because this is the most important transaction in people's lives. We've got to get that eliminated to the degree that we do. I would love to dive into that.
Look what we do. You've heard me say this. Look what we do. It's so fascinating. So when you apply for a mortgage in our industry, and I'm talking to everybody in our industry, it's a approve or reject resolution. Think about this in the rest of the world. So you go to a restaurant and you're 75 pounds overweight and you order the bloomin' onion at 4,000 calories. And the waiter looks at you, a waitress, and says, not putting that order in. Not for you.
Not for you.
I grew up as a redhead. So I go to buy a shirt. And I go into Express Men and I pull out this red shirt and I come out of the dressing room to see if it fits. And the clerk is there ready to take it off me saying, you have red hair. You are not buying that red shirt. Rejected.
Reject, yeah.
We do that to people from anywhere between 15 days and 40 days, depending on the contract time. That's what our industry is. So we have to know that any objection that they have, any fighting back, if the reason you're getting the sixth call in the day isn't that they didn't hear or they don't understand, it's they're afraid. When they tell you don't want a document, it's they're afraid. When they don't return your call 3 days in a row, it's because they're afraid all the time. So you better know that within your communication protocols, within the people that are dealing with them all the time. So, and that's a controllable as an owner. That's a controllable.
Dean, I love so many things you're saying here, and I am so excited about sharing this with our listening audience. I want to give people a window into your mind and how you run your company, because there's so many things that have made you the number one, been honored as the number one here in 2023 by National Mortgage News. One of the things you did, you set up some things during COVID that were really significant with your staff. If you could talk briefly about that, because it's a principle again that has carried over all the way into where we're at today.
Thank you for that question. And now that we're 2 to 3 years removed from March of 20, I can say this without fears of arrest or reprisal. I am in a very blue state here. I don't want to be political with anybody, but we have governors that would have. So here's what happened. So we get in lockdown like everybody else does in March of 2020. And we've got everybody
really got locked down too.
We got locked down. And so we have down to 5 employees in the building. Everybody's going home. We were ready for it. For some reason, we just had all sorts of remote stations ready to go. God was really providential with us there. So we sent everybody home and all the kids are home. And so Rod Corey, the president of the company, says, hey, we got a problem. What are we going to do to keep our moms out of, and he used the name of a hospital here in Rhode Island for mentally distressed people. I will not go any further than that. He said, what are we going to do to keep them from trying to work when we're very busy with their kids at home, getting online and not getting, what are we going to do? So the first thing we did is said, we'll send them dinner every night. So we did this big delivery of dinner to our underwriters, to our processors. Wow. Said, okay, that's one thing off the table. Then we thought about, hey, maybe we could send cleaners. But then Rod had the brilliant idea. He said, no, we got to send them college kids to the house to tutor their kids and watch them while they're on Zoom. About 3 months later, we did what you're not supposed to do. We took an entire empty area of our office and we built 35 workstations, and the kids came to work every day. And so did the college kids. And that continued for 18 months. We eventually got people who talked about this in their friend group that said, hey, my next door neighbor has this problem. Can we help? I said, yeah, send that kid in. We'll take as many kids as we can. Eventually, however, I got a call from a local news station from a woman saying, hey, I heard what you're doing. I'm a reporter at channel number. I'd like to send my kid in. I pay you whatever. And I said, well, you wouldn't have to pay me. And number two, I don't know what you're talking about. I was so petrified that this would get out. And then I'd go out in handcuffs. So we continued out. We had a graduation at the end of year 2. We had field day. Rod Corey, president of the company, his brother is a math genius. So he would come in on every 4th Friday with the middle schoolers and tutor them ahead to high school math. We would give them functions in the company, little functions that they could do once they get old enough. And I got to tell you, I love children. So for me to hang around with kids and just check on them down there, and it was a magical time. So that's when we broke in the top 100, but couldn't really tell anybody why we got so much positive feedback from our staff.
Well, I mean, it's embracing a problem and looking at it from the employee standpoint, and what can we do to enrich in their lives so they can enrich our business rather than putting it all on them. I think that's just outstanding. You know, you bring up your faith. How there are many people with varying faiths in the industry, and I think we are trying to be so PC, politically correct all the time. People really struggle with this, and I'd love to hear the principle, how you navigate this. How do you navigate your faith at work?
I appreciate that question because I don't want to be a secret agent about this. And again, I don't want anybody to feel judged upon or fearful. So I appreciate this. So number one, so let me take it to you this way. When someone comes to Shamrock and they're going to work here, I give them this little 2-minute speech, which I'll run by you right now, and probably a little bit less than that. And I used to not do this, and it got me bit once because I will talk about God. We have a prayer meeting that's optional for anybody. Even the email that announces the prayer meeting, you have to opt into.
Okay.
I don't want to unrest anybody.
Okay.
But I sit down and I tell them, look, here, I got to tell you this. I am the Jesus freak in the corner office. That's who I am. Now I'm going to tell you why that's good for you. And it's 2 reasons it's good for you. But first, I want to tell you what it doesn't mean. I will not hire, fire, promote, demote, pay more or pay less to anybody based on if they agree with my faith or not. In Shamrock, probably 90% of the people, probably 85% of the people are not believers of Jesus. Ask them if they've been mistreated or treated poorly or given any kind of demotion, not paid enough. I treat them all the same. So that's why I'm going to dismiss it right now. Just don't. It's not going to harm your career here. But now I want to tell you 2 reasons why it's a benefit, like a straight out benefit. One is, of the two, are the 2 things that I'm called to as somebody that's a Christian. I'm called to love my God with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. And I'm called to love my neighbor. So I'm going to take the second one first. I've searched the Bible. I've got to love my neighbor. I've tried to find a qualifier. Love my neighbor that thinks like me. Love my neighbor that looks like me. Love my neighbor that really loves the Patriots. Love my neighbor, and I just fill in the blank. There's no qualifier. And it's love the action. So when we did what we did with the school, that was a love for my staff and a love for their families. That's a good thing for you. You want someone that loves you. The second reason is probably even more powerful and not talked about. When I have to love God with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength, that means I can only have one God. Can't have the others. You've worked for people that have the others. I can't have the God of pride, being right, never being wrong, lust, greed. Now I struggle with those because I'm a man. I'm a failed man. I'm a sinful man, just like every other creature on this earth. But you won't have to work for somebody that serves another one of those dangerous gods. Those gods aren't good for you to work for.
So
and I said, that's it. You'll have to hear me say a God story now and again, use a biblical analogy, but I will not judge you. I'll not put this upon you. And
I think what you're really speaking to is, I just want to be authentic, and I want you not to be in fear. The other thing we were talking about, employees, bowers are in fear. They don't call for those reasons. Employees don't raise this up. You've created an environment where obviously it's working, being named the #1 mortgage company by National Mortgage News in 2023. It's working. People listen. I really encourage you this. And I mean, again, well, of course, anyone who has a strong faith, they'd like to have everyone understand that because the benefits that brings, obviously. But the most important thing that is here is that do not be afraid for those that do have a faith or don't to speak out. It's what is the guiding principles by which you run your business? What are the foundational values? And I'm really thrilled that you've helped us to get into that. We got to have you back. We just scratched the surface barely on so many good topics that need to be shared out to our industry. And I'm just grateful to have gotten to know you. I'm only bummed that it's taken me, I've been in the industry 50 years and I'm just now getting to know you. This is why I want to stay in this business, continue to influence in this business, because I want to find guys like you and share their message and share their story. You've been inspiring me since I met you. Hopefully our audience got inspired by what they heard today. Any final words you want to share with our audience?
First, it's a blessing to be here. My final words would be just words of encouragement to those that are in our industry that are struggling. I know that if you're an employee in this industry, it's trauma right now for you. It's nervous. You're anxious all all the time. I know if you're an owner, you're in the same boat. I would just encourage you all to be hopeful that on the other side of this, we'll all be redeemed and that we'll have a better industry for having gone through this, and everyone will be okay. Not everybody will still be here, but everyone will be okay. And I just encourage you, anybody want to reach out to me, I do a huddle a couple times a week, theshamrockhuddle.com, where I try to be as encouraging as I can. You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you need to
when you talk briefly about that, you mentioned that on some of your show notes that you sent me beforehand. I didn't get to that. So is this open to the industry? It's open to anybody who joins in?
Yeah, we have, I'm a small audience. I probably have 8,000 subscribers. I do 2 videos at 1 minute each a week. I've done it for a decade plus, theshamrockhuddle.com. I'm not talking about the mortgage industry all the time. In fact, I do it on Tuesday and Friday. My Tuesday message was on something you should not say to your children if you're a parent. Something you shouldn't say. And I'll tease it up. You know what it is? When I was your age.
Oh.
Should never say that. Now, I'll let you go watch the video as to why you shouldn't say that. But I just want to be I want to be a light in the industry. I want to be an encourager in the industry. I'm blessed to be able to do that. And I'm easy to reach. And I'm willing to go over anybody that's got core value challenges, core purpose challenges, vision for the future, which we didn't get a chance to get into too much. I'm available. I'll help wherever I can.
Yeah, it's really encouraging. I've really enjoyed our time together here today. I can see why Emily Farley and so many at Atlantic Bay respect you and your leadership so well. Casey Crawford's another one of those guys, a real industry icon, leader in the industry, respects you so much. Thanks so much for being here, Dean. What a blessing.
I don't deserve it, but I appreciate it.
You bet. Well, we're going to have you back. You can count on it.
I'll hold you to that. Thanks, David.
You bet.
You've been listening to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update with your host, David Lykken of Transformational Mortgage Solutions. Join us next week, and thanks for listening.